707. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're with Candace Nelson. She's a writer, an activist, and we're going to talk about what she's writing about and activating. That's the verb, right? I don't know.
Sounds good.
It works, yeah. You have a very interesting career, and you've done many things, but we've landed at this crucial point in terms of what's happening with the cannabis legalization movement. The vote is just about to happen. This will probably air before it does. Mm-hmm. Where do we stand? What's going to happen? What's California going to do?
It looks like it's leaning towards the legalization.
But why? What are the indicators? I will say brass tacks. I hope, sure, but there's always some squirrely thing that happens, or some issue, or some attendant issue that comes up after the fact that stalls these things out.
You know, so far I haven't seen anything
Yeah.
to that effect yet. Everything's looking pretty good for it. There's some things that some people are against, but it seems like for the most part, people are going for it, especially with the decriminalization part of it.
Right.
And that looks like it's going to take maybe some time. If this passes, it's gonna set a lot of people free, and it's going to it's just going to be a really good thing for that, especially, I believe.
You know, that's the part that I haven't really put a lot of thought to. I'm thinking it's going to be it's going to be a different world in terms of local commerce. It's going to be a different world in terms of recreational stuff. But you're saying by legalizing marijuana to the level that it will be, it actually mandates that people who've been incarcerated for marijuana-related crimes would have to be released.
Correct.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Do you know any numbers about how many people might be getting out? Or
You know, I don't know specifically any numbers, but I imagine it's going to affect millions of people.
how does that change how we think of not just marijuana, but the nature of nonviolent crime, right? Or crime that is that doesn't affect anyone but oneself, or something that won't be a crime anymore?
I think it's more of a societal thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think society needs to find where I think the society needs to find a good medium. Society needs to start accepting things that, really what is cannabis? It's just a plant.
Right.
So for it to be scheduled the way it is under federal law, it's a little bit ridiculous, but that has its history.
It's a Schedule I narcotic, allegedly, right? So that's like heroin, LSD, the stuff I just did in my dressing room, right? All that, right? For what? What was the purpose of criminalizing, like you said, a plant?
It all leads back to money. A lot of things lead back to money. Back in the early 1900s, it was acceptable. And then they wanted to tax it. And for some reason, they were taxing it, and then people were hired into certain positions, and they wanted to make something really bad, and it happened to be cannabis. Cocaine used to be added to a lot of things before that was, considered bad by society.
And it was considered a medicinal phenomenon. It was in Coca-Cola, as we all know, right?
Yeah.
But why the plant? Because of its ubiquity, the ease of growing it?
I think, hemp also is something that's associated with it. I think in a lot of ways it was the cotton industry that also demonized it because hemp is so useful.
Right.
It could have been, the medical society. It could have been politics, the FBI, the CIA, and well, not the CIA, but that wasn't, but the FBI, it's a lot of things that came together for a plan. And I think when you have something that does a lot of good and that can bring people together, I think a lot of times it usually is demonized.
So what happens, though, once it's legal, right, how does that change all of the infrastructure that's put in place? What happens to the CIA, or the FBI? How does it change that culture? And would there be any blowback for us?
Does it really change what the federal government feels? They still feel that it's illegal. So really, even though the state is going to legalize it, I think that federally, whenever they feel like coming in, especially with the change of the president at the beginning of the year, where, there might be some issues.
Yeah, you raised a really good point and a good distinction that I've completely overlooked, which is the fact this is a state issue, not a federal issue. Even though it will be legalized in California, it seems like, it won't be legal federally. It won't federally be recognized. Well, how have other places like Colorado and Washington State dealt with that disconnect between state government and federal government?
Well, I think a lot of the other states, they deal with it they take a high priority in making sure that they're being compliant, that they're paying their taxes, that they are regulated in every possible way. I mean, the people who are in the marijuana, medical marijuana industry have really made strides in, being there and showing up for a legislature. And everything that encompasses the whole industry. They put a lot of time and work into it. And, people, activists like myself who are out there doing things, and there are people out there doing way more things than I am. But it's because people put so much caring into it.
So best case scenario, everything goes through without a hitch, an economy develops around it, and with every economy, there's not just the transactional aspect of moving the product around and all that, there's the marketing, there's the PR, there's all the soft tissue stuff that goes into it.
Right.
I'd imagine as a writer, and I know you've done copywriting as well, this is something you might be interested in. Are we going to see ad campaigns for marijuana? Are we going to see like a whole different kind of like, are we going to see the commercialization, like literally with commercials of legalized cannabis?
I doubt we're going to see commercials on television, because I don't think that's going to be appropriate, especially when, well, alcohol still has its commercials here and there, but it's usually focused at a certain audience.
Right. I remember beer commercials on Saturday morning cartoons.
Whoa.
Yeah, I had my first Schlitz when I was, I don't know, just kidding. There's no cigarettes allowed on television in terms of advertising. I would imagine marijuana, cannabis would fall in that as well.
I think a lot of companies I think they're trying to figure that out right now. As a copywriter for the cannabis industry as well, I think some people are really ready to get out there and really get their teeth into how they're going to market this to the general public when it becomes legal.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of other places are just sitting back and they're going to see how it goes and see how they want to approach it and maybe see if it's even going to pass. Because, sometimes people come in at the last second, throw some money into an ad campaign that, turns a lot of people's minds around. So I think we're really going to have to wait.
Something happens and there's a tragedy or something. But,
right.
Well, we're talking with Candace Nelson. She's a writer and activist. We'll be right back on 707. It's 707. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're back with Candace Nelson. She is a writer and activist. I remember when I became a writer, about 3 weeks ago. When did you become a writer? When did you realize you had that impulse creatively within you?
Well, actually going through some things that my mom kept not too long ago, I've noticed things from about first grade.
Oh, wow.
All the way until sixth grade when we made a Fortunately, Unfortunately book. And
one of those from the class.
Yeah, it was like, and then we got to illustrate it too with our little drawings. It was great.
They're both interesting, edifying, sweet, and horrifying to look at.
Yeah, and then like some reports and a lot of things that she kept throughout my school years. And I got some pretty high marks on those. I didn't get through math class so well, but writing and English I always did well at. So it's always been a passion of mine.
And then writing creatively, when did you feel like you were really getting your voice?
Well, I think, the past couple of years, I was approached by the Peace Press, which is something that the Peace and Justice Center of Sonoma County puts out.
Yeah.
And they asked me to write a couple of pieces, one on Black Lives Matter, and something else I wrote for Black History Month, and I'm writing something else for an upcoming issue as well. And, I just like to talk about things that are near and dear to me. Right. And that's another reason why I write for the cannabis industry along with that as well.
Can I make the assumption that the cannabis is near and dear to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's been in my life for a long time.
Yeah.
And I actually had an opportunity to go to Amsterdam University in Oakland,
Right.
which is, one of the premier cannabis colleges. And
So I used to live in Oakland, and it took me like weeks before I put together Oakland, Amsterdam. Oaksterdam, like, why do they call it that? That doesn't make sense.
I know, right? And then it's great. And then their colors like kind of matched with the Oakland Athletics, and I'm like, this is a place I need to be.
Yeah.
I had an internship there, and so it was something.
What do you learn in that kind of context? Well,
I was there for a semester, so we talked about, they went over growing, they went over law, they went over how to know your rights and protect yourself with law enforcement.
Right.
Because basically it was just dealing with the medical aspect of it. Because,
Which was what was then legal and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they cover a wide variety of things. It's not just, I don't even think we dealt with anything as far as medicating or anything like that.
Right, yeah. No, I wasn't asking you, like, did they teach you the role of joining?
No.
And then when you're writing for, about Black Lives Matter for, a local audience, right? You're writing for a predominantly white audience.
Right.
Right?
Right.
When you're taking that on, do you feel you have a responsibility to translate issues and make them accessible in a way for that readership, or do you just do your own thing? I mean, how do you approach what could be a kind of a difficult assignment?
Well, it's important to actually have both sides.
Right.
It's something that I have to use my own voice on, but I also have to put out there for other people to understand. I mean, that's what a writer does. If you're going to create, you want people to understand what you're saying, or you might as well just put it on a canvas for people to interpret. But when you use words and language, you have to put it out there for a certain audience to be able to understand. And in Sonoma County, it's a very conservative, and
I know people forget. People think that it's a liberal Northern California hippie town.
Yeah, not
It's
even.
not.
No.
Yeah, and it's scary when you come up against it and you realize, oh, it's always been like this. We
Right.
just think because we're all hanging out.
Yeah.
Have you had any experiences coming up against the sort of conservatism that sort of hides itself here?
I come from Richmond, which is, just in the Bay Area, just outside of San Francisco and Oakland. And I spent most of my life there, and I've only been here for 15 years. And I've never had more interaction with law enforcement. And
Wait, in Sonoma County?
in Sonoma County, I'm from Contra Costa County. It's different.
Wow.
It's more integrated. There's more culture and diversity down there. Here, not so much.
Right. Well, I mean, can we talk a little bit about that experience? I mean, it sounds like we can attribute that directly to the fact that you're African American.
Oh yeah.
Right, and police here are responding to that.
I mean, maybe.
Is that fair to characterize it like that?
I'm not quite sure what it is. I can only speak for my experience being a woman.
Yeah.
And then being a light-skinned African American as well. It's different for people who are much more darker complected than I am. And when I came into contact with the law enforcement that I did, I was down in Sonoma, and this was some years ago. And usually it was because my white friends were being rambunctious, and someone called the police. So
This is Sonoma, like Sonoma?
yes,
the
like
country?
this, like little town of Sonoma.
Yeah.
But lately I haven't been, because I'm a lot more mature, and I don't hang around such rambunctious people anymore. But yeah, it was always something, and I did become the focus, and I did get asked a lot of questions, but I don't know. I can't speak for everyone's experience because, for one, black males tend to get it more often than females, and then people who are darker complected also.
And so when you're tackling this kind of issue in print, how do you contextualize it and create sort of not just empathy but awareness for how this happens in your experience for just some white dude who's going to read it and go, wow, that sucks. But like, how do you reach them?
I pretty much put my feelings out there. When I wrote about Black Lives Matter the first time, and like I said, I'll be writing another piece on Black Lives Matter coming up, I have to share how I feel. And then too, I have to put it into a context where they would understand. So I asked them a question: how would you feel if it were this way, for you? Some people, it's hard to understand that kind of thing. And it's a difficult thing to do. That's where the creative side comes in.
Right, I was going to say. Well, they keep asking you to do it. Obviously, it's working. Yeah. We're talking with Candace Nelson on 707. We'll be right back. It's 707. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're back with Candace Nelson. We left off talking in the last segment about Black Lives Matter and how you've been writing lately about that for the Peace and Justice publication. But you may be aware of some groups locally that are sort of intersecting with the public at large on the related issues. Can you kind of walk us through some of those?
Yeah, well, we have the Community Action Coalition, which is a student community group that some JC students started over the summer. And they've been doing some things, and they're trying to stay active. Like, for instance, they did a couple of walkthroughs and silent protests at the Wednesday night market over the past summer. A couple of times. It ruffled a couple of feathers, but then they also, just wanted to engage with the community as to what's going on. There's also the Racial Justice Allies, which is a local group of white folks that got together who want other white folks in Sonoma County to discuss the Black Lives Matter movement. And they've been doing a pretty good job. They meet every other month, and I think they're having one coming up right after the election time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Black Student Union, a guy named Damian Square, I believe. I think he's going to be on the show pretty soon.
Oh, nice.
But they had a march, I think, last week.
Oh, yeah, to the sheriff's office.
Right. In relation to Andy Lopez?
Yes.
Does that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah.
With these kind of activities, what do you think is being accomplished besides creating awareness? Do you think it's coalescing it's an actual sensitivity amongst people in Sonoma County?
There's a lot of people who are silent about a lot of things that happen in this county and outside of the county, in America in general. And some people don't want to be silent anymore. Some people, I think it's a lot for the visibility. They want people to know this is what's going on. Why is it okay that, this group of people took some young kids, some of Andy's friends, took a plant down to the sheriff's office, and they wanted to offer it as a peace offering. And they also wanted to talk. And when they came back, nobody knew what happened to the plant.
Right.
So it's like, okay, so they're going to keep, that's why they went again and they asked, hey, what happened to that plant?
It sounds like there's a culture of tone deafness with law enforcement. I mean, a plant is a very symbolic gesture.
Yeah.
Right. It's something you're supposed to plant, it grows, it flourishes.
Right.
And they lost the plant. So what does that telegraph? What does that signify to, the people who brought it? Well,
Exactly.
It says they don't give a crap.
Right. I mean, yeah. So I think it's important. It's important what they're doing. There's a lot of people in Sonoma County that care, but there's even more that don't. And a lot that like to keep the status quo the same. So.
But the status quo it's shifting. The demographics are shifting. It's a different county than it was. Do you think it's the growing pains of how Sonoma County is becoming more dynamic and more diverse that's causing some of the frictions?
I think that's it. That's exactly it. When I came to the town of Sonoma 15 years ago, I hardly seen anybody brown like me, no less darker.
Right.
And when I did, I tried to run over to them and talk to them right away. In fact, in Sonoma County, there's still not a lot of black folks here. I mean, there's a very large, Latino community, and there's some Asian folks. There's people here and there, but not a lot of African Americans at all. So I think it's hard for people like myself living here to really be involved in Black Lives Matter and other things like that are going on nationally without having to leave the county. So I think it's important that people in the community start, just trying to go to more cultural things. Like, for instance, I had my own cultural group, the Hayru Network, for 5 years in this county. And every month I did a meeting, and a lot of people would come, but usually it was more for the movie aspect. When we had discussions about things, they would hardly ever show up, but I did have a few, faithfuls that always came.
discussions are hard. I think that's where it starts. Discussions are difficult, right?
Sometimes. When the racial justice allies has their discussions, they have rooms packed full of people. When I started going a few years ago, the first time I went, they had a huge group of people on a huge stage. And then their numbers started dwindling, but they still keep going. And the past 4 or 5 meetings have been 30 plus people. So more and more people are starting to wake up in Sonoma County, which is really, it's a great thing to see.
What do you think Sonoma County is going to look like 5 years from now?
That'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see.
I mean,
It's getting more culturally diverse, but I'm not quite so sure because.
well, there's diversity, and then there's the sensitivity issue. It can be diverse, but it can be racist as all hell.
Yeah,
right?
Which is how it is.
Right.
It's not really diverse, but it's still racist as hell around here.
Yeah.
The looks that my wife and I get, when we go in, because she's quite, a bit darker complected than I am. She gets nasty looks, just because of how she looks, and I get nasty looks, and and I can't even imagine what it would be like to be a darker skinned person or to be Mexican and to be looked down upon, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, to be segregated to a certain part of the city and to have your city leaders, voting against this and that has to do for your family.
Right.
It's a hard thing to deal with. So I'm glad that there's a small community of us activists out here that are really trying to change the air in Sonoma County. So to me, it's quite hard to see where Sonoma County is going to be in the next 5 years, or how it's going to look.
The amount of vigilance you have to keep up to make sure that your life is being lived the way you want to live it without being oppressed by stupid laws or people's ignorance and that kind of thing. Sounds like it could be exhausting. Is there ever a moment where you can stop and just pause and not have to worry about who you are in the context of all this crap?
There is. It's called meditation.
Yeah.
That's the only time when you can truly get away from it. One of the things that I posed as a question in my Black Lives Matter article was, how would you feel if you seen people that look like you, that you identified with, constantly being killed in the street? Sandra Bland was around my age when she, lost her life. She knew her rights. It was all out there on video. All she was doing was ask, what did she do wrong? She got snatched out of her car, taken to jail, and she never left there. And that could be me, because I know my rights. But say someone is having a bad day, say law enforcement's having a bad day and their wife left them, or whatever happened, and I'm just trying to assert my rights, and I get snatched out of the car.
Right.
It's a hard thing. It's very traumatizing when it happens over and over again, and when you see people not getting even questioned. They get a little bit questioned, but not really, and they get paid when they're getting investigated, and and nothing ever happens, and it's a vicious cycle. It's hard. And it's not only people who look like me, it's also just the lower class people in general, because if you're poor, that's just the way it is. But don't be poor and a minority, because then you'll get it worse.
Is there any hope?
I mean, there's always hope. I mean,
is there only hope?
with every generation, I mean, it depends on each individual. I mean, I still have to stay positive. I still have to believe that there is a way to get to people, and especially in this county, when I have a lot of white friends, and I have a lot of older white friends, and they've been doing this in this county for the last 30 years, and I appreciate that, because to me, if they didn't do it then, and if they weren't doing it now, Sonoma County wouldn't be where it is now.
Right.
It's that far. I mean, but I don't know.
Candace Nelson, thank you for coming. Yeah, come back.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
You've been watching 707.